Any fence needs reliable posts. Both a high-tech fence made of Penoplex, which I know firsthand, and fences made of corrugated metal, metal picket fencing, chain link mesh, and even the cheapest fences made of blue tinted mesh all need reliable posts. So far, nothing better than a metal post has been invented for these purposes. Metal is even inserted inside brick posts. Usually, the work of installing metal posts seems complicated and labor-intensive, especially on difficult soil with a high clay content which is prone to frost heave. That's exactly the kind of soil we have. In this case, concreting is required at a greater depth below the frost line. So how can you install such posts easily, quickly, once and for all, and most importantly, very accurately? It looks like I found a simple solution. With the help of a garden auger and simple homemade inexpensive tools, which at first glance turn this difficult job into real pleasure, allowing you to easily achieve millimeter precision. Moreover, not only an experienced DIYer can handle this job, but also a retired gardener, a school student, a college student, a musician, a programmer, and even a single housewife. Since in this case, you need a minimal amount of building materials, which can be delivered using your own car or even brought on a gardener's cart. Viewers of the Yasha Koshak Songs channel will be the first to learn this important information. The topic is very relevant, so let's go through everything step by step. Hello everyone. It all started with making a post centering tool. This is a simple device that in theory should allow you to install fence posts with very high precision, making it much easier to get perfectly vertical posts coming out exactly from the spots on the ground that were originally planned, and not from places with large deviations from what was required. The centering tool can be made in different ways. I use an unnecessary piece of sheet metal, 2 mm thick. In the center, I make a round hole with a diameter of 20 cm. This is exactly the diameter I will be drilling holes in the ground for the posts. A jigsaw with a metal cutting blade handles this task perfectly. Then I take a small piece of fence post and some smooth rebar with a diameter of 10 mm as I make a little rebar cage into which the piece of post fits tightly. On the long workpiece, I make sure that everything turned out well. Then I needed something like a funnel, which should make it easier to pour concrete into the drilled concrete pile. This kind of dog cone turned out to be too small in the narrow part. And then I suddenly realized the benefit of that force that always keeps me from getting rid of seemingly unnecessary junk, a very old cast iron Chinese grill. It's from those years when China probably hadn't even thought about kicking everyone's butt, including the USA. One of its parts works perfectly for me. It only needed minimal modification. I drilled a deep hole with a garden auger. I fixed the centering device in place with iron stakes. And with precision accuracy, I concreted the first post. The method works, hooray! I gained my first experience, which allowed me to draw several important conclusions. Probably the main one is that the process is very economical. For reliable concreting of one post, you need very little crushed stone, sand, and cement. I got some practice, so now I can set everything in place. In the pre-marked spot, I start drilling holes with a garden auger. I bought this auger at a discount for only 30 Belarusian rubles. That's no more than 1,000 Russian rubles, about 10 bucks. Our soil is rich in clay, but there are no stones in it. The only minor difficulty is getting through the fertile layer, which often contains roots from nearby trees. But an old pruner, a garden trowel, and a narrow spade help the auger get through this layer. I make sure that the hole hasn't shifted during the battle with the roots, and then I keep drilling. The capabilities of this primitive auger leave much to be desired. Back in the early days of the Pesny Yashi Koshyaka channel, I made a video about making a really good auger. Thanks to the thread-like design at the very beginning, it screws itself into the ground and kind of pulls itself in. You don't need to push at all, you just need to turn it. I gave that auger to my father-in-law, and he took it far away to his country residence. Honestly, I'm just too lazy to make a new one. Basically, even the most primitive auger gets the job done too. And the lowered plumb line clearly shows that the drilling is being done without significant deviation from the vertical. In its basic configuration, my store-bought auger is 1 meter tall. The set includes a segment that allows you to extend it by another meter. I make a mark with electrical tape at a distance of 1 meter 50 centimeters from the blades. It's early May outside, and at this time in our area, the groundwater is usually at its highest. That's why, after drilling down to about 1 meter 20, I start paying attention to the moisture of the extracted soil. Here's where the mark is now, 1 meter 50. The soil moisture doesn't seem to have increased, but I decided to stop drilling and get ready to pour concrete, just in case groundwater appears. When installing the very first post, I didn't drill down to the water. The second post, the central one, is located in a lower spot. I'll use 1 part cement and 5 parts crushed stone for every 3 parts sand. Board piles are economical and easy to make. Reinforced concrete is a very reliable and durable building material. And with proper waterproofing, it becomes extremely reliable and long-lasting. That's why I'll settle the issue of concrete waterproofing once and for all. A centering device is installed over the drilled hole, which is 1 meter 50 centimeters deep, but this is already a second-generation device. And I start positioning it. In the previous video about the fence, I explained how easily and simply I marked the spots for the posts. With the help of a highly tensioned steel cable, a plumb line, and a measuring tape, the marking cable is still stretched tight. Using the plumb line on the carabiner, I locate the centering device's position relative to our plot and the neighbor's plot. With measuring tapes, I find the position of the centering device relative to the left and right marking stakes of the neighboring posts. The center marker is set precisely. I secure it to the ground by hammering in metal angles. After that, it's just a matter of technique. I'm trying to place the second generation post into the centering device. The welded rebar has widened the lower part of the post and it doesn't fit into the centering device. That's a mistake, an ill wisher would exclaim. Yes, it's really a mistake. Let me remind you, my name is Yasha Kosiak, and this is the second generation centering device, made specifically for the second generation posts. So other than Kosiak, that's me. There's no mistake here. The centering device allows the post to emerge from a precisely defined point on the ground surface. It also prevents it from unintentionally rotating around its own axis. And this can easily happen during the concreting process. At the same time, the post remains adjustable in 2 directions, which makes it easy to set it perfectly vertical. When planning this fence, I watched a ton of videos. Following a common hack used across the post-Soviet world, many people drive pieces of rebar in different directions and weld the post to them during installation. Guys, that's just total amateur hour. It's unclear why guys who professionally install fences and canopies can't do something like this. Instead, they keep struggling on their knees, trying to drive pieces of rebar into the ground in the most uncomfortable position and somehow weld the post to them. Moreover, the rebar driven in different directions will probably not be removed after pouring the concrete and will become an additional support for the heaving forces, which, like a jack, will try to lift and tilt the post. The well-engineered part from the Chinese grill still fits the second generation centering device. Thanks to the convenient funnel and the small diameter of the smooth rebar, it's very easy to pour in the concrete. Then I start filling the pile. Looking at this part from the grill, I was genuinely happy for our Chinese brothers. They didn't just stop at producing mass market goods, but went much further. And the fact that our Belarus has good relations with China is very good. I carefully tamped the concrete with a long bar. While concreting the very first post, I realized that in this job, you can do without a concrete mixer. A rotary hammer with a mixing attachment mixes cement and sand very quickly and efficiently in dry form. Since what ruins concrete is actually water, or rather its excess, I try to add water equal to only 50 to 70% of the cement's volume. The concrete turns out thick, but that's exactly what I need for my task. With about 40 to 50 centimeters left below the ground surface, I stop pouring concrete. It's enough to make just 5 small batches with the rotary hammer. I remove the central part of the centering device. I install a piece of 110 mm sewer pipe and fill it with concrete. The post is fixed again. I cover the protection made of sewer pipe and concrete with sand, which I also tamp down thoroughly. The distance is exactly 251 centimeters. The accuracy of the installation is once again excellent. Accuracy. Before I move on to installing the next posts, I think it's necessary to touch on another very important part of the process, preparing the fence posts. I bought a 6-meter long square steel tube with a cross section of 6 by 6 centimeters. And with a wall thickness of 3 millimeters first, I go over it with a rag to remove the coarse dirt. After practicing off camera, I realized that at least 3 more stages of cleaning are needed, or even more. I take the first piece of rag, soak it with a heavy-duty metal degreaser, and start scrubbing. It quickly becomes clear that the bare square steel tube is heavily covered with oily components. They are probably used during the manufacturing process and also serve as anti-corrosion protection during transportation and outdoor storage of the metal. Periodically moistening the rag, I wipe down 3 sides of the square tube. Then I turn it 180 degrees and vigorously rub it again. Surely mineral spirits could have been used for the initial cleaning. It doesn't evaporate as quickly, and the degreaser is only for the final stage. I start working with the second piece of cloth. The pipe has become cleaner, but there's still some oiliness left. I repeat the whole process. At first, the third rag is encouraging because it stays clean. But soon it shows that the third stage of cleaning is just as important as the previous two. I realized that you could keep cleaning the metal like this endlessly. But at some point, you just have to stop. The difference between the first 4 cleaned pipes and the rest that are uncleaned is striking. I used almost 1 liter of degreaser and 3 rags for each pipe. I went online to look for life hacks on cleaning metal before painting. The first one won me over with its low cost and availability. Like washing dishes, I vigorously scrubbed the pipe with a kitchen sponge using plenty of soapy water. I rinsed the sponge frequently in the bucket. The test rag quickly shows that this popular life hack is not an easy cure-all either. You only get a more or less satisfactory result after rinsing the pipe at least 3 times. There's not much pleasure in messing with water, especially in the cool weather I was working in. After washing like this, I wipe the pipe as dry as possible. Otherwise, with the protection washed off, it will definitely start to rust right away. When cleaning with a solvent or degreaser, the dirt is absorbed by the rag. When using dishwashing liquid, the dirt ends up in the water. As we can see, this is also quite a painstaking process. So not everything that seems like a life hack really is one. If you relax a little and work less actively with the sponge, some spots will be left unwashed. Undiluted cleaner doesn't help either. In the midst of this not-so-fun foam party, what kept me going was the thought that if we ordered a fence from our local fence builders, we'd get a slapdash job just like these degreased posts before painting. And there's no guarantee they won't skip this step altogether. Even the lowest quality paint job will last a couple of years. When everything starts to rust, it'll be nearly impossible to find those shoddy workers and hold them accountable. Basically, if you wash for a long time, you can still end up with a poor final result using this method. For example, when there's no degreaser and no way to go get one. Then I decided to test the next most common life hack using power tools, namely a pressure washer and foam from a foam cannon with touchless car wash detergent. I arranged the remaining pipes so that the active foam hits two sides of the pipe in one pass. I turn it over. I repeat the process. From experience with touchless car washes, I know this works much better when you actually scrub it. That's why I go over each side of all the pipes with a sponge. Rinsing off the car cleaning chemicals that I hope have had enough time to react is probably the most enjoyable part of all the work I'm doing today to clean the metal. You can really feel the lack of mechanization. Another moment of truth. The miracle I was hoping for so much isn't happening. Conclusion: if I had cleaned the pipes with a special metal degreaser without getting distracted by questionable life hacks, I would have spent less time. So yes, I'm cleaning the pipes with a degreaser, and if you share what's worked for you in the comments, I'll be very grateful. Now I'll use this kind of anti-corrosion mastic. Unfortunately, this isn't an ad. It looks like something epoxy based. Because you need to mix one component with another, my neighbor bought it. On the metal structures he protected with this compound, there isn't even a hint of corrosion after 12 years. At the time I painted the 6-meter pipes for the posts, I didn't yet know what exact sizes I would cut them into. I only knew that I wanted the above ground part of the post to be about 2 meters high, so I decided to paint 2 meters on each end of the pipes. Right before painting the surface, I degrease it again. With this painting method, I have a lot of room to maneuver. For example, by cutting, I can get one post that's 3.5 meters long and extend a 2.5 meter post to 3.5 meters by welding a meter long pipe to it. Or I can choose another option from the many available, whichever I end up liking more. The neighbor's mastic turned out to have great coverage. I didn't paint the pipes completely, since after looking into it, I already knew that the part to be set in concrete shouldn't be painted for better adhesion with the concrete. After all, rebar isn't painted either. I think you, like me, know that auto painting is a meticulous and painstaking job, and yet an average fence lasts much longer than an average car. So why don't we approach painting fences with the same level of responsibility? I think that manufacturers of steel tubing actually benefit from the fact that we often paint them without proper preparation and effort. Fences that could last almost forever start to rust. That's why new ones are needed, and we end up buying metal for fences again. I coat all the workpieces with 2 coats, allowing them to dry in between according to the instructions. By the way, the very first post installed off camera was just a piece of pipe 3.5 meters long, 1.5 meters were underground, and 2 meters were above the surface. By that time, I had come up with a more reliable option for the posts. For it, I needed a more advanced centering tool of the 2nd generation. I didn't have any more sheet metal, so I decided to heat treat a piece of profile pipe with a cross section of 25 by 40 millimeters. Even with my modest amateur welding skills, I had no problems making it. If someone who doesn't know how to weld at all decides to repeat my experience, for example, a single housewife, I think she can easily find someone nearby who can weld this simple device. Maybe for a small token of appreciation, all the dimensions are arbitrary, except for the 60 by 60 millimeter cell made of smooth rebar. I had high hopes for the yet untested post aligner to make the work easier, so I even took the trouble to paint it. I also painted the 1st generation aligner. For the posts of the 2nd, more advanced generation, I bought some 12mm rebar at the nearest steel yard. When it comes to speed, I'm not the fastest worker. I'm constantly getting distracted by something. That's why everything gets done with breaks. I tried to protect the unpainted part from corrosion as best as I could. The pipes have already gotten dusty, but at least the paint has hardened. We've been thinking about this fence for almost 20 years, so a week here or there, or even a month or two, is just a moment. There's really no need to rush. I'm marking and cutting the pipe exactly in half, that is, into 2 pieces of 3 meters each. You can support the affordable innovations introduced on the Pesniyashi Kosaika channel through Kosyak or by sponsoring on YouTube. Viewers from Russia can do this through the Boosty service, the link is under the video. I'm going over video tutorials on welding rebar to profile pipes. With each attempt, the result improves. I choose to weld the rebar to the centers of the square pipe sides instead of the corners. The idea is that with this welding option, the overall cross-section will be smaller, and such a post will have more room to maneuver in the hole. This is important if during drilling there is a noticeable deviation from the vertical. The world isn't perfect after all, and this needs to be taken into account. I welded a square piece made from a 2mm metal offcut to the end. Its main purpose is to prevent the post from sticking its rebar into the bottom of the hole. And it could be moved to set it perfectly vertical. With the welded rebar, the total height of the post is again 3.5 meters. In the climate of our Gomel region, which is in the southeast of Belarus, concreting to a depth of 1.5 meters is considered more than sufficient. For harsher areas, it's enough to simply extend the rebar part of the post and drill deeper holes. When the thickness of the metal post is 3 mm, such posts are, of course, stronger than when the thickness is 2 mm or plus. For those of us who aren't welders, it's easier to weld this kind of metal. The chance of messing up and burning through the metal is lower. Extending the post with rebar doesn't really save much money, but still, it should be fixed in the concrete as securely as possible. I always try to work with the bare minimum of tools. That's why I don't have a special miter saw. But a square, a marker, and a small angle grinder are a bit slower, but they also get the job done. Later on, I decided to weld with fairly long tack welds like this. And for this simple job, I think those who can't weld will easily find someone nearby who'll do it for a drink. In the worst case, someone willing to do it for a small fee through an ad. The next hole turned out to be a record breaker in terms of both the number of roots and their thickness. It was impossible to deal with some of them using pruning shears or even a narrow spade. A garden saw came to the rescue and I had to risk dulling it. The plumb bob attaches to the carabiner with a simple loop, making it easy to move and quickly adjust the plumb line's length. By the time I drilled the second hole, the concrete should have already started to set. The centering device can be removed and moved to a new spot. Putting a sewer pipe onto the post and concreting it in place is not my idea. I found it online. I think for the most part, it's a reasonable solution. This way, the lower part of the pile turns out wider, and the upper part where the main forces of frost heave are applied is narrower. Plus, I cover the plastic pipe with sand, which is a non-heaving soil. First, I concreted one of the edge posts, the one off camera, and the very central one. Over 50 meters, the cable sags no matter how much you tighten it. In some places, it's even lower than the height of the posts. That's why I made a cable lifter for the central post out of a piece of board and 2 bars. Now it will be even more convenient to work. When concrete sets, it shrinks. That's why later I'll need to add it up to the very top of the plastic pipes. I also saw an option where a large diameter pipe is placed into the hole for the entire depth, and then the post is concreted inside it. I think that's kind of nonsense. A thick pipe with a post concreted inside it will sit loosely in the hole, and the post will wobble along with it. I checked with certified construction specialists. The experts say that it's okay to pour concrete directly into the drilled hole. There's no need to protect the walls with anything. And this turned out to be the most root-free hole yet. Also, now we can use an additional marking cord. It's better to secure it at a small distance, not right up against the posts. Otherwise, one post will push it slightly out of line, then the next, and the fence will end up curved. The thickness of the cord depends on the weight and level. The marking cord makes it easy to control the alignment of the posts along the line, but they need to stand vertically in 2 planes, and you can't determine that with just a cord. When I ran out of gray sewer pipe scraps, I bought orange ones. Now it should be even more reliable. At the end of the fence work, I also plan to fill the posts either with concrete or a sand cement mix. This is to prevent internal corrosion. I'm not rushing with this yet because when I install the fence infill, I might have to drill them. I haven't gotten myself a tool belt like American workers yet. I make do with a box that holds almost all the simple tools I need for this job. It moves from post to post and doesn't get lost. One 25-kilogram bag of cement is enough to install 3 posts. I think I clearly showed how little sand and crushed stone is needed for 1 post. But I think that if you leave the top part of the post without this pipe and just cover it with sand right away, nothing will change. Supporters of this method keep insisting that the top freezing layer of soil will slide along the plastic but will stick to the metal and try to push it out. That's why I go along with the majority and do it like everyone else. Besides, the pipes are only painted at the top and the concrete will protect them from corrosion anyway. I almost made a mistake and betrayed one of the main commandments of a DIYer. I even had sinful plans to hire professionals for the job. I also asked them to estimate the cost of pouring a strip foundation, as it's the most reliable option for this soil. So for a strip foundation on poured posts, which are only about 80 centimeters deep and look more like a grillage foundation for 2 sides of the fence, 50 plus 30 meters, they quoted me 20,000 Belarusian rubles with metal posts that are thinner than mine. That's $7,000 or more than $500,000 Russian rubles. That's 90 bucks or 7,000 Russian rubles per linear meter. Even if I had that kind of money, burying it in the ground like that, almost literally, would be foolish, especially for the sake of a fence between good neighbors. If I start pouring this strip myself, then the Pesniyashi Kosyaka channel will be dedicated only to this work for the next year. I can't do that either. Then I asked how much screw piles would cost if they were screwed in 1.5 meters deep, leaving 2 meters above the ground. The pile installers said they wouldn't be able to screw them in, so that the above ground part would be strictly vertical. They can only do it just above ground level. With this option, the posts must be vertically welded to the piles. Another drawback of screw piles is that screwing them in loosens the soil, causing the pile to wobble. That's why it's recommended to dig out and concrete the very top of the piles for fences. In short, it's not cheap either, and it's complicated. I let the critters from the composter go on their way. This is a very lazy and slow way to build a fence. Thanks to using a top string and a plumb line for marking, I was able to mark the posts that were accessible. I skipped marking the ones I couldn't reach yet, and as I gradually get into the work and start believing in myself, I make those posts accessible that, for example, were blocked by the composters before. We only removed the old fence mesh in the necessary places for the time needed to pour the concrete. This approach seems psychologically easier to me than dismantling everything at once. You can get tired from this even before you get to installing the posts. If you share your more advanced methods for installing posts in difficult soil, I would be very grateful. At the time this video is released, there is still a need to install posts, so I will gladly try a more reliable and cheaper method. Not a single post shifted during the concreting process. By sharing this video, you will also do a great service for many people. Give a big thumbs up, subscribe to the Pesniyashi Kosyaka channel, follow on YouTube, the VK group, TikTok, and Zen. All the links are below the video. Also click on the bell, and then I will definitely keep you informed. Let there be peace all over the world. Thank you.